as I said, one day I realized that I was still gay, that my reparative therapy had never worked. Previous to that, I pulled out my Evergreen Workbook for Men and read over it and didn't seem to find any answers. I was pretty depressed and I didn't understand why. I'd moved from Utah to California. I was done at BYU at this point, and as was my wife. And I took classes at UC Riverside, and I had gay-themed literature. And I had colleagues who were gay, openly gay in relationships with their partners. And I saw some of the disconnect. I mean, I'd always been kind of critical of the way that gays had been treated by members of the church, but I always thought that's the members, not the church. But finally something just kind of snapped. I mean, I think that Elder Packer's talk didn't help. I remember I was not affected by it as much as I've come across other bloggers and other people speaking about it were, but it did kind of bother me that all of a sudden, like, not only was I just same-sex attracted and not culpable for it, but that why would God do that to me? I mean, it did kind of jar at me, but kind of more on the shelf type thing. So anyways, it came to this moment in January of last year when I realized I was gay. I read Bill Bradshaw's information about homosexuality being biological, and I thought that sounds pretty reasonable. Here's a Mormon saying it. I remember that I came across other articles. I remember I talked to North Star. I read their forums. I ended up chatting with a few people and trying to just wonder, how do you make being gay and married to a woman work? I started therapy. I was already depressed, and so that made sense. And I was worried they'd convince me to be gay, but they really didn't. They just kind of listened to me go on, and I think she was very careful, given the fact that I was a Mormon, to not push me to do anything. In fact, a little maybe too careful, but in any case, I came to the decision that I didn't want to be married, and I told her that, and she said okay, and I didn't expect that response from her. And it was difficult because I went back and forth about this a lot, even with her, and I'm sure that must have been terribly painful. And eventually, we kind of flipped. I didn't want to get divorced anymore, but she realized the situation when I told her I didn't feel the same way for her as she felt for me, and I couldn't. It's not that I didn't want to, but it was impossible for me. And I just realized that, and she decided that based on that she wanted to get divorced. It was mutual. I fought it a bit, but I didn't ever cancel it. I didn't ever put up a big fight about it. As I was getting divorced, my family pressured me to not do it. I stopped going to church a bit with all the conflict going on, especially with the conflict over how I felt as I was coming to terms with things, but I did eventually, after she left, to go live with her parents out of state. I did go to church. I was lonely, and I talked to my bishop, and he encouraged me to reconcile with her. I mean, he did, in fairness, ask me what I wanted, and partly I wanted to reconcile with her because this was my best friend, and I felt a tremendous loss. And it was too hard to be by myself, living alone after years of being with someone. And so I eventually kind of wrote her a bit, and she eventually had to tell me, Alex, I don't want to be married to you. Nothing you say is going to change that. It doesn't matter if you figure out that you're bi. It doesn't matter because I've given you enough chances now, and I need to move on with my life. That was difficult for me, but I finally owned up to the fact that I was gay as a result of that. I realized that I wasn't going to get to change that, and it was hard. My family was not helpful. I shouldn't say that. I have some cousins and some brothers who were wonderful to me, and they were supportive of me, whatever I decided to do. And even my ex-wife was very supportive of me, and as far as she could be, you know, going through so much herself. And she even helped me with my family, telling them how they needed to lay off me, that there wasn't anything that they could do to change her mind, and so why try to change my mind? So then in last year we got divorced, and I was scared. I didn't know what would happen. I continued to go to therapy to kind of help me with everything. I went back and forth about the church, but a couple times I went and they talked about eternal families and about how Prop 8 was God's command, and I kind of had it, and I felt so uncomfortable going to church that I couldn't go anymore. And then I did end up actually going on Christmas when I visited my family. I ended up going for a few weeks in the singles ward, although that had been uncomfortable. You know, I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't want to marry a woman. I didn't really talk to anyone about it though, except I did have